The 1914 Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, under the leadership of polar explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, would have been the last great journey in the heroic age of discovery. It was a daring scheme. A small party was to cross the Antarctic continent for the first time. According to legend, Shackleton announced the expedition in a now famous advertisement.
Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Ernest Shackleton.
Shackleton's ship Endurance was named for his family motto, "By endurance we conquer," a phrase that summed up Shackleton's own drive and resilience. He was determined not to repeat earlier mistakes that had cost him the prize of the South Pole. Following the successful Norwegians, Shackleton brought along 69 Canadian sled dogs. Food supplies would also be depoted for the 6-man sledging party that would make the 1,500-mile journey across the Antarctic continent. Shackleton's own ship would approach Antarctica from the ice-strewn waters of the little-known Weddell Sea. The sea's gateway was the island of South Georgia, the Endurance's last port of call. For all of November, Shackleton and his crew waited, hoping that unusually icy conditions in the Weddell Sea that austral spring would improve. On December 5th, 1914, the Endurance left the island and headed south. On the third day, they encountered the enemy, the huge compacted chunks of surface water known as pack ice. The pack stretched to the horizon, broken only by gaps of open water known as leads. The challenge would be to navigate the shifting 1,000-mile tangle of leads, all the way to the continent. After 6 weeks of travel, the Endurance was only 100 miles from the continent when she entered a field of heavy brash ice, slowing the ship to a crawl. Captain Worsley recorded a fateful decision.
The character of the pack has again changed. The floes are very thick. We cannot push through except with a very great expenditure of power. We therefore prefer to lie to for a while to see if the pack opens at all when this northeast wind clears.
But when day broke, the men found the ice had closed around the ship. No water was visible in any direction. As the days passed, the ice showed no sign of relenting. They were trapped until spring, some 7 months away. Beyond even radio contact, no one in the world knew where they were. They had been thwarted only 1 day's sail from their destination. In his diary, Dr. Macklin wrote,
"It was more than tantalizing. It was maddening. Shackleton at this time showed one of his sparks of real greatness. He did not rage at all or show outwardly the slightest sign of disappointment. He told us simply and calmly that we must winter in the pack. Never lost his optimism and prepared for the winter.
Optimism was at the very core of Ernest Shackleton's personality. Known to all as the boss, he was a born leader who was from his youth driven by a romantic quest for adventure. Now his own expedition was in trouble, trapped in the pack ice, drifting helplessly north. By May, they had been trapped for over 3 months. the sun disappeared beneath the horizon, leaving days dark as night until the end of winter. The neat piles of sledging supplies mocked Shackleton's ambition and the dreams of his men. Meanwhile, ominous forces were at work. Ice, their old enemy, menaced the helpless ship. Under pressure of the tightly congested pack, huge blocks of ice buckled into ridges, threatening to crush her. In July, a blizzard raked the Endurance. As the ice groaned and heaved, Shackleton paced his cabin. Captain Worsley recalled,
He said to me, "The ship can't live in this, skipper. It's only a matter of time. What the ice gets, the ice keeps."
On October 27th, 1915, 10 months after their entrapment in the ice, Shackleton gave the order to abandon ship. It was minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Tents and clothing had been salvaged, but there were not enough fur sleeping bags to go around. William Beckwell, an American sailor, recalled the lottery Shackleton arranged.
There was some crooked work in the drawing, as Sir Ernest, Mr. Wilde, Captain Worsley, and some of the other officers all drew wool bags. The fine, warm fur bags went to the men under them.
In the chill morning, Shackleton gathered the company to explain his plan. Dr. Macklin recorded,
As always with him, what had happened had happened. Without emotion, melodrama, or excitement, he said, "Ship and stores have gone, so now we'll go home."
This calm front belied the night Shackleton had passed pacing the ice alone.
The thoughts that came to me in the darkness were not cheerful. The task now was to secure the safety of the party, and to that I must apply every bit of knowledge that experience of the Antarctic had given me.
There is nothing that can crush a man as to see his dreams crumble to the dust. But on the other hand, he realized if the one goal had disappeared, we'll have another one. And so, if I can't cross the continent, I'm going to bring all my men back alive. Because you mustn't forget that polar exploration was littered with dead bodies. This almost fanatic, well, it was a fanatic desire to bring his men back alive. This then became the driving force. It was the only thing he cared about.
Shackleton's first impulse was to march to the nearest land, some 350 miles to the west. The men were allowed 2 pounds of possessions each, with few exceptions. Hussey was allowed to keep his banjo, which Shackleton called vital mental medicine. But there could be no extra mouths to feed. On Shackleton's orders, 3 puppies and Mrs. Chippy were shot. Hurley wrote,
"It is beyond conception even to us that we are dwelling on a colossal ice raft, with but 5 feet of frozen water separating us from 2,000 fathoms of ocean, and drifting along under the caprices of wind and tides, to heaven knows where."
Timbers from the ship were used to build a new home, Ocean Camp. The wheelhouse became the new galley. Hurley ingeniously converted part of the ship's boiler into a stove, which was fueled by penguin skin and seal blubber. A daily routine was established. Hunting for penguins and seals became the main activity. Again, the men dragged the loaded lifeboats weighing more than a ton apiece, hacking their way through pressure ridges that obstructed their passage. At times, they trudged up to their knees in snow.
Shackleton's great characteristic was the ability to compel loyalty, even against his men's better judgment. Now, this has got to do with some force of character, some flame that burns within a man.
Game grew scarcer. There was no food for the dogs. Shackleton gave Wilde the unhappy command to shoot some of the dog teams. Hurley paid a last tribute to his old companion.
Hail to thee, old leader Shakespeare. I shall ever remember thee, fearless, faithful, and diligent.
Within weeks, the remaining teams were shot, and this time, eaten. McNish wrote,
Frank Wilde shot the last of our faithful dogs, of which we kept the 5 young ones for food. Our rare flesh tastes a treat after living so long on seal meat, and this last 14 days on almost nothing.
As the men drifted to the edge of the pack, the ice began to disintegrate around them. One day, Ord-Lees awoke feeling seasick. The ice had become so thin that the swell of the ocean could be felt through it. Soon, nothing would be left beneath them. Their 3 small lifeboats would carry all 28 men on a journey that would last no one knew how long. The days passed in painful rowing and bailing. Stable ice could not be found, and nights were now spent sitting helpless in the Black Sea. To complete their misery, many of the men were now suffering from dysentery.
I think they only had 1 hot drink a day, and he said that they only ate a ship's biscuit, which, in his own phrase, you look at for breakfast, you suck it for lunch, and you eat it for dinner.
What kept them from cracking was Shackleton's sheer willpower, his leadership, this flame that burns within him.
Overwhelmed by misery and fear, some of the men broke down and wept. Now Shackleton knew he must make for land at any cost. Changing course, they struck out for Elephant Island. When dawn broke, Shackleton recorded,
The weather was very thick in the morning. Indeed, at 7 a.m. we were right under the cliffs, which plunged sheer to the sea before we saw them.
Elephant Island. The men had been 7 bleak days at sea and over 5 months on drifting ice. It was a year and 4 months since they had touched land.
Shackleton had saved his men, in the sense he'd got them all alive out of the ice and onto terra firma. But now how to get back to civilization? Elephant Island was off any conceivable shipping route. Not only that, she was nowhere near the routes of the whalers and sealers that used to come down there. So somehow Shackleton had to get his men to a port of call, even if it was only a lonely island where the sealers came.
Staring down impossible odds, Shackleton made a bold decision. He would not wait. He would sail for rescue. Cape Horn, the closest land, was beyond reach, as it would mean sailing against the prevailing wind. But in the path of the westerlies was the island they had set out from, South Georgia. The plan was made. Shackleton would take a 22.5-foot long boat 800 miles across the world's most dangerous ocean. Shackleton chose the strongest and most seasoned sailors for the journey. Moored offshore, the Caird was loaded with 2 tons of stone ballast for stability in the towering waves. Water from ice laboriously melted over a blubber flame was stored in kegs. They took food for 4 weeks. Beyond this, they knew they could not survive.
Bruised and soaked, with never a long enough interval for our bodies to warm our steaming clothes, our feet and legs had swelled and began to be superficially frostbitten, with the temperature at times nearly down to 0.
McNish alone attempted to keep a sea log, but on the 9th day he abruptly broke it off. They worked round the clock in 4-hour shifts, 3 men vainly attempting to sleep on the rocky ballast below, while 3 others held watch above, bailing, pumping, trimming the sails, fighting to keep the Caird afloat. On the 10th day, Worsley believed that they were a little over halfway. He recalled,
2 of the party were very close to death. Shackleton kept a finger on each man's pulse. Whenever he noticed that a man seemed extra cold and shivered, he would immediately order another hot drink to be prepared and served to all. He never let the man know that it was on his account.
Vincent's upper lip was torn away by a frozen metal cup.
Oh God, it must have been desperate. That's all I could. It must have been desperate. My father's ears, his 2 ears, suffered frostbite. They were like bones.
On the evening of May 7th, the 14th day at sea, a piece of kelp floated by. Land was near. Worsley recalled this moment.
We looked at each other with cheerful, foolish grins. The thoughts uppermost were, we've done it.
On the evening of May 10th, the 17th day at sea, the James Caird sailed into the entrance of Keen Haakon Bay on South Georgia. Their single map showed only the island's coastline. The interior was unknown. Icy and forbidding, prey to sudden blizzards and hurricane-force winds, the whalers considered it impenetrable. This chaos of peaks and glaciers had never been crossed. By 6:30 a.m., they had climbed a ridge that looked down upon a site familiar from a 1.5 years earlier, Fortuna Bay. Stromness was around the corner. At 3 in the afternoon on May 20th, Shackleton, Worsley and Crean stumbled into Stromness Station. They had been marching for 36 hours. At the home of Thorald Surley, the station manager, they knocked on the door. "Who the hell are you?" Surley reportedly asked. "My name is Shackleton," came the answer.
The whaling manager couldn't recognize them because they were dirty, emaciated. They were soot-grimed because of living over blubber stoves for so long. Their clothes were filthy. Their hair was uncut. They were like men returning from the dead.